Jonah Crow had ridden into Mercy's Hollow once as a savior, carrying only the weight of a rifle and a promise. He had left with the same rifle, but a hollow in his chest where gratitude once lived. 10 years had passed. 10 years of open plains, of nights under the cold stars where the wind whispered names he did not speak aloud. Now he was back, and the town he once saved looked like a stranger's painting. Crooked rooftops, shuttered windows, and dust that refused to settle. The smell of smoke lingered, not from chimneys, but from memories of barns he had saved and battles he had left behind. His horse's hooves clopped softly against the rutted lane, a rhythm that matched the pulse in Jonah's chest. In his saddlebag was a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth, Mary Lou Avery's last possession. The woman whose life had been a lighthouse in his storms and whose death had sent him wandering for a decade. She had written a single line that carried a decade of longing. "Jonah, if you can, come home. She wants to see you." The paper had aged, but her words remained steadfast. The town was tense when he dismounted. Heads peeked from behind doors, children pointing, and men squinting through the fading light. Jonah's name had become a thing spoken with both reverence and venom. A boy ran past him, shouting, "There's a reward for him! $10 and a horse." The words flung themselves through the streets like sparks in dry grass, and Jonah felt the eyes of Mercy's Hollow pin him where he stood. The blacksmith Walt nodded cautiously. "Jonah Crow," he said, voice low. "You don't look like trouble, but trouble looks like you now." His hand hovered near the notice board where a fresh sheet of paper flapped in the wind. Jonah Crow wanted for theft, arson, and murder. The words cut sharper than any bullet he had ever faced. He had left to protect them once, to carry danger away from the heart of Mercy's Hollow, and now they wanted him dead for surviving. He turned toward the parsonage. A window glowed softly. Mary Lou was there, frailer than memory had kept her, seated by the hearth. When their eyes met, Jonah felt the years of separation tighten in his chest. Before he could take a step, a man's voice broke the quiet. "You shouldn't be here." Sam Riggs, a farmer, stepped into the street, rifle in hand. "They say barns burned last spring," a ledger vanished. Ellison, the parson, stepped from the doorway behind Sam. "Let her see him," he said softly. "Mary Lou deserves that much." Then a shot rang out. Glass above the door spider-webbed. Chaos unfolded. Men scattered, revolvers drawn. Jonah ducked, eyes scanning. The town he had saved was now a battlefield. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, a man Jonah once called friend, a man who had shared victories and betrayed trusts. Thomas Thorne. The rifle in his hand gleamed. Time slowed. Jonah knew what he had to do. The farewell he had come for hung like a fragile hope behind the parsonage window. And now, the first shot of what might become a war had been fired. His hand hovered over the pistol at his hip, every heartbeat urging him toward her. The wind whispered through the town like a warning. Jonah Crow had come for one last goodbye. Mercy's Hollow had other plans. Jonah didn't draw. Not yet. He looked at Thorne, the man he'd fought alongside on Dead Man Ridge, the man who now held a smoking rifle. "Thorne." Jonah's voice was a low growl, cutting through the rising panic. "You missed!" Thorne's face was a mask of cold fury. "I don't miss, Crow. That was a warning. Leave now, or the next one finds your heart." The townsfolk were frozen, caught between the specter of their former hero and the man who now seemed to hold power over them. "Why, Thomas?" Jonah asked, his gaze unwavering. "The ledger? The fires? That's your work, isn't it?" A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd. Thorne laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "This town needed a villain, Jonah, and you were conveniently absent. It was easy to pin my debts on a ghost." He had been framing Jonah all along, using his absence to cover his own crimes, turning the town's fear into a weapon. Thorne had taken over, promising security while secretly bleeding Mercy's Hollow dry. The missing ledger wasn't just about money. It contained proof of Thorne's extortion, his threats against the very people he claimed to protect. Sam Riggs, the farmer who'd first confronted Jonah, looked from Thorne to Jonah, his expression hardening with dawning realization. "He's been charging us protection, Jonah," Sam said, his voice laced with shame. "Said it was to keep drifters like you were described from causing trouble." "He created the trouble," Jonah said, never taking his eyes off Thorne. "Just like he created the wanted poster." Suddenly, the parsonage door creaked open wider. Mary Lou, frail but determined, stood in the doorway, supported by Parson Ellison. "He's telling the truth," she called out, her voice surprisingly strong. "Thomas Thorne threatened me. He said if I didn't help lure Jonah back, he'd burn this church to the ground with us in it." The crowd gasped. The lie they had been living under was unraveling. Thorne's face contorted with rage. He raised his rifle, no longer aiming at Jonah, but at Mary Lou. "She's a delirious old woman," he screamed, but it was too late. The spell was broken. In that split second, Jonah moved. He wasn't the gunslinger of legend, all flash and fire. He was a survivor. He dove sideways, drawing his pistol in a single fluid motion. He didn't aim for Thorne. He aimed for the bell rope hanging by the blacksmith's shop. The shot cracked through the air, and the rope snapped. The heavy iron bell crashed down onto the edge of the blacksmith's water trough, sending a massive wave of water and a deafening clang across the street. The unexpected chaos was all Jonah needed. Thorne flinched, his aim faltering for a heartbeat. In that instant, Sam Riggs acted. He swung the butt of his own rifle, not with lethal force, but with the frustration of a man deceived. The wood connected with Thorne's arm, and the rifle clattered to the dusty ground. Men who had been pointing guns at Jonah now turned on Thorne. The whispers of reward money were replaced by angry shouts of betrayal. They surrounded him, their faces a mixture of fury and shame. Thorne, disarmed and outnumbered, looked at Jonah with pure hatred. "This isn't over, Crow," he spat as the blacksmith. Walt and two other men grabbed him. Jonah ignored him. He walked to the parsonage, his pistol now holstered. He knelt before Mary Lou, whose eyes were filled with tears of relief. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out the oilcloth bundle. He unwrapped it carefully. Inside was not a weapon or a treasure, but a small worn wooden bird, crudely carved. "You gave this to me," Jonah said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "the day I first left. You said it would help me find my way home." Mary Lou smiled, a faint but beautiful light in her tired face. "Did it work?" she whispered. Jonah looked around at the town, at the faces of people who were slowly remembering who he was, not the myth or the villain, but the man. He looked at the setting sun painting the crooked rooftops in hues of orange and purple. "Yeah," Jonah said, placing the wooden bird in her hand. "It did." He hadn't come for a fight. He had come to say goodbye to a memory, but instead, he found a home that needed saving one last time. Not with bullets, but with truth. As he stood, he saw the little boy who had shouted about the reward peeking from behind a barrel. Jonah winked at him. The boy, after a moment's hesitation, gave a small, shy smile back. The anger in Mercy's Hollow was beginning to settle, like dust after a storm, and for the first time in 10 years, Jonah Crow felt the hollow in his chest begin to fill. He wasn't just a savior or a ghost anymore. He was home. Thanks for watching our story unfold. If you enjoyed this tale of the Old West, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more adventures, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new video. We love bringing these stories to life for you. Let us know in the comments what you thought of Jonah's return. Until next time, stay safe out there on the trail. The street fell silent after the gunshot, as if Mercy's Hollow itself were holding its breath. Jonah Crow didn't move. His fingers hovered just an inch above the worn leather of his holster, but he kept his hand still, a choice that surprised even him. Years ago, he would have drawn without thinking. But years ago, this town had loved him. Now they watched him like a wolf cornered in their yard, their faces a mix of fear and cold judgment. From the far end of the street, a figure stepped into the fading light. He was taller than Jonah remembered, broad-shouldered, and wearing a sheriff's star that hadn't been there when Jonah rode away 10 years prior. It was Jacob Thorne. His rifle was lowered slightly as he approached, boots crunching over shattered glass. "Jonah," Jacob said, his voice calm but edged like a whetstone. "You shouldn't have come back." The words carried more weight than the rifle in his hands. Jonah swallowed hard, the dust in his throat suddenly thick. Jonah gave a single curt nod. The simple movement sent a ripple through the crowd. The air in here felt gentler, warmer, filled with the scent of sage and old books. The soft glow of oil lamps cast a peaceful light over the room. Mary Lou Avery sat in a rocking chair by the hearth, looking as thin as a reed, a thick blanket wrapped tight around shoulders that once seemed to carry half the town's burdens. Her breathing was shallow, but her eyes, those steady, ember-like eyes, brightened the moment she saw him. "Jonah," she whispered, her voice cracking like dry timber. For a moment he couldn't speak at all. He had faced down gunfights, stared down outlaw bands, and survived winter storms that froze cattle where they stood. But nothing in all his wandering had prepared him for the sight of her fading away in that chair. "You called," he finally managed to say, his voice soft. "I couldn't stay away." She lifted a trembling hand, brushing the side of his face as if checking to see if he was real or just another ghost returning with the wind. "You look tired," she murmured. He offered a faint smile. "A little older," he admitted, "but seeing you, it's like stepping back into sunlight." Tears welled in her eyes, catching the lamplight. "There's something you must know, Jonah. Something I should have told you long, long ago." She gripped his hand with a surprising strength, her gaze intense. "Jonah," he said urgently, "you need to come with me." Who in this town would dare? Somebody who knows Jonah, wouldn't he fight back? "Jonah, don't go." "Not yet." Jonah turned back to her, cupping her cheek gently. "I'll be back," he promised, his voice low. "I swear it," but she shook her head weakly, her grip on his hand tightening again. "No, I mean, don't go after them. They want to break you. They want you angry." Jonah leaned in and kissed her forehead, leaving a whisper there. "I won't break. Not again." He stood, hat in hand, and followed Jacob back outside into the cold night air. The street was no longer just watching him, it was waiting for him. More lamps had been lit, and long, distorted shadows stretched across the dust. A bitter wind swept through the town, carrying the distant rumble of thunder. "Tell me the truth," Jonah said as they reached the hitching posts. "Who's stirring this town against me?" Jacob stopped, his shoulders tense. For a long moment, he didn't answer, staring out into the darkness. Then, with a voice as heavy as stone, he said, "The man behind all this is someone you once trusted." "Someone you rode beside?" Jonah felt his blood go cold. Memories flashed through his mind, shared campfires, laughter under starry skies, battles fought back to back, and betrayals that were only half understood at the time. Jacob turned and looked him square in the eyes, his own filled with a grim certainty. "It's Logan Halley." Jonah's heart dropped like a stone into a deep well. Logan Halley, his closest friend once upon a time. The man Jonah had saved in a bloody canyon ambush. The same man who had vanished without a trace the very same night Jonah left Mercy's Hollow for good. He's back. Jonah whispered, the words barely audible. Jacob nodded slowly. And he's not alone, Jonah. Logan's been working this town from the shadows for years. The robberies, the fires, the lies, all of it. He's been poisoning this place against you, waiting for you to return. Jonah stared into the rising dark, the weight of the last 10 years pressing down on him. The truth will unravel, loyalties will break, and Jonah's final goodbye might just become a fight for redemption. Morning crept over Willow Bend like a slow confession. Pale light spilled across rooftops, touching broken windows, glinting off the shards of a town that had nearly swallowed its own soul. Eli Mercer walked through the quiet main street with a stiffness that came from more than the beating he'd taken. His ribs ached, his jaw throbbed, but none of it compared to the weight in his chest. The night had been long, too long. And what waited this morning was longer still. Behind him, Lily Carr stood on the boardwalk holding her son's hand. The boy clung to her skirt, his eyes wide, unsure of what the day would bring. They'd insisted on coming, with Lily saying Eli shouldn't face this alone. Eli had tried to argue, but she had that stubborn, gentle look in her eyes, the kind he'd seen once in a woman he'd loved long ago. He just didn't have the heart to fight her. Up ahead, the sheriff's office door hung broken on one hinge. Sheriff Tom Braden stood inside, leaning against his desk with both hands, staring at the floor as if the truth itself might crawl up out of the planks. He looked older today, smaller, somehow. Eli stepped inside. A long silence stretched between the two men, filled with everything that had gone wrong and everything that still needed saying. "You look like hell," Braden muttered, his eyes still fixed on the floor. "And you look guilty," Eli replied, his voice low and steady. Braden exhaled sharply. "You're not wrong." Lily stayed outside with her boy. Eli tried to close the door behind him, but it wouldn't shut, hanging there crooked and defeated. He waited. Braden finally straightened, but his posture didn't carry its usual authority. It sagged like wet rope. "I reckon you want answers," he said. "I reckon you got him." Braden nodded once, slow. Then he reached under his desk and pulled out a small metal box. It was dented, blackened, smeared with soot. He placed it on the table between them. Eli recognized it immediately. It was his father's. The same lockbox Eli thought had burned up when the Mercer's barn was set ablaze 15 years ago. The fire that had killed Eli's father. The fire the town blamed Eli for, after he'd left. "What's this doing here?" Eli asked, his voice tightening. "It never burned," Braden said quietly. "Wasn't in the barn. I found it outside, the night your pa died. I kept it, and I kept something else." He opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside lay a single folded letter. Eli's breath caught in his throat. "I never read it," Braden whispered. "But I knew it could change everything. And the truth is, I didn't want everything changed." Eli stared at him, the silence crackling. "What do you mean?" Braden swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "You leaving, it made me sheriff. You being gone let other men rise. The town needed someone to blame for its sins, and blaming you kept things quiet. It kept things simple." The words struck Eli like a punch. He felt a searing heat rise behind his eyes, not tears, not yet, but something raw and close. "Tom, my father died thinking I wasn't coming back. And this entire town lived off that lie." Braden didn't argue. He didn't deny it. He just nodded, the weight of 15 years pressing down on him. Finally, Eli reached into the box and lifted the letter. His father's familiar handwriting was scrawled on the outside. Asterisk Eli for when you return. Asterisk. His throat tightened. His vision blurred, his hands trembled as he opened it. The ink was faded but still readable. "Son," it began. "If you're holding this, then I've already gone where a man's words can't reach. I wanted you to know this, you didn't fail me. And you didn't fail this town. Men twist truth when fear rides close. But you were born with a different kind of backbone. One day you'll return not for me, not for them, but for the man you're meant to become. And I pray when that day comes, you'll forgive those who didn't deserve it. That's the only way a man lives free. Your father, James Mercer. Eli closed his eyes. The room felt smaller. The world felt both heavier and lighter all at once. His father had known. All these years he'd known. Braden's voice finally cracked. I should have given it to you then. I should have told the truth before the town turned on you. Before I helped them do it, you could have stopped a lot of hurt, Eli whispered, the words barely audible. I know. Another long silence hung in the air. Then Eli refolded the letter with care, the same way a man lays down flowers on a grave, and placed it back inside the box. What are you going to do? Braden asked, his voice edged with nervousness. Eli really looked at him, and for the first time, saw not the sheriff, not the man who'd stood tall all these years, but a man who'd carried guilt longer than he'd carried his badge. I ain't here to punish you, Eli said quietly. My father wouldn't want that. Braden's shoulders crumpled in a mixture of relief and shame. But I asterisk telling the town the truth, Eli added, his voice firm and unwavering. Every single word. Braden nodded. He didn't fight it. He knew it was time. Outside, folks had started gathering, drawn by whispers. By curiosity, by the impossible sight of Eli Mercer walking their streets like a ghost refusing to stay dead. Eli stepped out onto the boardwalk. Lily and her son stood close by. You ready? She asked softly. No, he said honestly. But I reckon it's time anyway. And so, word by word, Eli told the town what had been hidden for so long. He told them about the lockbox, about the letter, about the fire, and the lie that had shaped 15 years of bitter silence. Some hung their heads in shame. Some wept openly. Some stepped forward to apologize. Not everyone did, but enough. When he finished, the wind brushed dust across the street, warm and gentle, like the world itself was finally exhaling. Lily touched his arm, her presence a quiet anchor. What now? Eli looked out at the horizon, at the golden light spilling across the valley. I think I'm staying a while, he said. Maybe long enough to remember what hope feels like. The little boy, no longer afraid, reached for Eli's hand. Eli took it. And for the first time in 15 years, the gunslinger who'd returned for one last goodbye felt something he'd thought had died with his father, a beginning. The kind of man only gets once in a lifetime.